So I got through the shoot, and after the shoot is when I decided I was just going to research it a little bit more before my appointment, just to make sure everything is good for me. And shortly after that, I decided that I couldn't go through with the abortion. I couldn't physically picture myself going in there and doing that, and then I just couldn't. I knew that if they called me again for my appointment, I was going to reschedule again. I just felt like the shoot was too much of a sign for me that I shouldn't ignore it. So I called my parents and I said, I can't physically go through with the abortion, but I'm going to have an adoption because I don't want to be a parent still. And they were really supportive. They said they'll help me find agencies. They'll do whatever that I need them to do. And at that point, it was something that I feel like I could do. I said, I can totally do adoption. I'll give this baby to someone who wants to be a parent and who can't have kids. And I thought I'd be doing I thought that was a great option. I also knew that I never wanted to be tied to my ex. I was so happy to be free from that. And doing the adoption also just didn't have any ties to him anymore. I realized then that I would rather be single than be in a miserable relationship that's controlling and toxic. And that was after my first boyfriend. I'm realizing that. But I didn't want to go back to that situation at all. Shortly after, I called my roommates that I had signed a lease with and said, I'm pregnant. I'm going to have an adoption. I'll be back the following year, but I'm just going to take a year off to have the baby. They were shocked, but also supportive and said, yeah, for sure. When you're ready, we can, be roommates next year. I took a medical leave of absence from my school, so I would be able to roll over the scholarship money I had, so I wouldn't lose any of that funding. Also, my student loans were on pause for that year because I wasn't going to be attending school. So I gotten that figured out. Now I was just focusing on, I need to continue working so I can have this baby and then move on with my life. I went to my ultrasound appointments really reluctantly, and I remember every time they would tell me that the baby was getting bigger, I was so disappointed. Because a part of me was hoping that maybe I would just miscarry. And then, thank God, it would be not my problem, out of my hands. And no, of course, super healthy. I was like, of course, of all things, it's like a healthy baby. Which is crazy that I was thinking that now, but I was just so terrified of it growing at me. And I pictured this skeleton baby. I don't know. I pictured this weird thing that I wouldn't be attached to at all. So my doctor told me that I was having a girl. And I didn't want to hear that because I could picture my little sisters. I was 10 when she was born. And I remember her being a baby, and I just couldn't picture having a little boy. So for me, a girl, it was a little bit too close to home. And it's like, oh, this is different. Now I'm having a girl, and I can picture my sisters. But I brushed it off. Like, someone's gonna be really happy for this baby. Because I was taking a year off school, I decided to really just make as much money as I can this year and get myself focused at work and just busy my time with that until the birth. I got a job at Nordstrom and I was working in the jewelry department. I was selling to older conservative women. And I remember being super embarrassed of my stomach. So I wore a fake wedding ring because it helped with my sales. And it helped the old ladies to think I had a husband at home. And I wasn't a single mom trying to hustle her way at work. And they would say, oh, I bet your husband's just dying over this baby. I'm like, oh, for sure he is. And I just thought it was easier to wear a fake engagement ring than to explain myself over and over again, or to potentially get judged and miss out on a sale. So I started looking into adoption and started looking at different families. And one of my friends at the time who was adopted, she didn't know her birth parents, but her adoptive parents were going through a really nasty divorce. And just everything that was going on in her life, I would think about when I'm looking for families, because I felt like I couldn't give this baby a good home. I feel like I was too young, too selfish. I had so much of my life ahead of me. My life would be over if I had this baby. And there was for sure a family that was ready to have kids and couldn't have kids, and it would be such a blessing. But then I was looking at families and I started getting protective. I was always into true crime. And so I would think, what if, she gets molested or something happens? I wouldn't be there to know or protect her. I would just be assuming that someone would be taking care of her based on an interview, based on a background check. Don't get me wrong, adoption is amazing. And I know several adoptive families and they are amazing. For me, I thought, I'm 19, going to be 20. Am I really not able to give her a good life? I mean, I wasn't 13 and pregnant. I was realizing that I may just be really selfish because my family was willing to support me and step up and help me with babysitting. I had an option to have a baby and not be homeless or not be kicked out, which I know a lot of women struggle with that situation. And you feel like your hands are tied. But I felt like I didn't want anyone touching my baby. And when I started talking about her like that, I started realizing that am I getting attached? This is strange because I'm not very maternal and I don't like babysitting kids. I don't think other kids are cute. That was just never my personality. Also, my ex had communicated to me that if I did adoption, he would fight for full rights to the baby. And that actually terrified me because knowing how much his parents crippled him and the person that he was and how he was so controlling and toxic, I didn't know how he would be with the baby or if he would be physically abusive down the line with a baby. I was terrified to think that he would have full rights to the baby, I feel like that was just me giving up and just saying, oh, whatever. Especially with how free I was feeling from that relationship. To put a child in that situation willingly without caring seemed so selfish on my part. I finally got to the point where I decided I was going to be a mom. And I didn't know how good of a mom I would be. I didn't even know if I would be maternal. And my mom knew that. She was also worried that I wasn't going to be maternal. We had talked about it multiple times. Like, I don't know. I just don't see myself wanting to have a child. It was so strange for me because I would hear these stories of people that had gotten pregnant and they were so happy. Their family, was rallying around them. And I'm like, how are you happy? Like, you know that your life's over, right? I never could relate to that. Just accepting the situation and moving on. And that was beyond me. The fact that I got to the point that I was going to be a mom and I would just make it work. It was one of those things where I was a hard worker. I was always driven. It's just one of those things that I have to do to get to the next step. And this whole time with my ex, he was constantly trying to get back in the picture, hoping we were going to get back together. And he started saying, if I'm going to try to get full rights to her, even if you have the baby. And that always scared me too, because we're in California. That really, rights to a child never really gets taken away from a mom unless they're neglectful or a drug addict. So once I knew my rights and I felt more confident in that, but he would say things all the time that would make me really fearful of my ability to have a child, or just rude things like, how is someone going to want you again if you have a kid? Finally, I got to the point where I had to block his number because it was just so toxic. And my parents were supportive of it. They're like, you just need to get your head clear and focus on this pregnancy and getting through this, and not all the baggage that he's trying to bring into this. Just focus on having the baby and having a healthy pregnancy. I had a baby shower, and my parents and their friends and everyone just came around me and really supported me. And I remember at the baby shower, it really hit me that I was having a kid. Everyone was saying, congrats. I'm like, why? Like, congrats? This is something I'm just going through the motions on. And I was so scared. And they were, giving me, I had a diaper supply for a year probably. And after the baby shower, I remember just crying with my mom. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't be a mom. And all my friends, I had just turned 20 and they were dating, doing things. I'm like, I cannot be a mom. This is like so difficult for me. This is why I never talk about it. I ended up having a healthy pregnancy, but I was so emotionally drained that I never once enjoyed it. I never took, I think I have like one belly photo. I had my close friends, Jenna and Heather, who were there for me the whole time. And I realized that my friends who I partied with and my surface friends faded away. I didn't have like strong, like the friends I thought were my real friends weren't when it came down to it. And when they all of a sudden realized you couldn't go out with them anymore, or, you know, you're invading on their plans, it was a real eye-opening experience for me too, because I realized who my true friends were in all of this. And they were so supportive. Jenna's family was living in Newport at the time. And so we'd go down to her beach house and I would just feel normal. Like I was with my friends, you know, I'm going to have this baby, but they made me feel like I wasn't this old lady having a kid. And I was so thankful for them. And during this time too, I felt like, and during this time, my relationship with God was so much stronger because I was literally relying on him for everything, like just to get me through each day, because I was a mess, literally emotional mess. And just thinking my life was over. And I remember reading this I had this devotional that I would read every morning. It was just like little passages. And I remember reading this one. It's Jeremiah 29:11 through 14. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil." Oh my God, what is wrong with me? "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me, when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you. And I'll bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile." And I remember reading that and just being like, I can do this. I remember thinking, I'm at this point, God's not just going to leave me to the wayside and not care about this baby's life. So I was just worried about all the things, like how am I going to afford this baby? How am I going to go to school and still have the career I wanted? I wanted to become an attorney, and will that deter me? I was having all those fears. Now I'm just going to be a mom, you know, that has probably have to work 4 jobs just to get by. I was really stressing about all the practical things about having a kid at that age. My doctor was so amazing throughout this as well. He pulled me in his office one day and said, "Look, I've been delivering kids for so many years, and no one ever comes back to me and says they regret having their kid." He's like, "I know you're emotionally having a really hard time, but you can do this." And that was so necessary for me at the time, to just hear that other people had gone through this and they've come out the other side. He even told me that his kids were in this really elite school, and he had seen one of his patients there with her son years later. He's now in college. And he said that she was like me, going through the same situation, and was so nervous to have the baby. And her son's doing so well. He's so bright. He's at this top college. And that just really gave me hope, just knowing that other people had gone through this and come out the other side. So I would have highs and lows throughout the pregnancy. Came to the point where it was the birth. I was having a scheduled C-section. I had a cyst on my ovary. So I had the option to either have the birth and then come in a few days later to remove the cyst. I would still have a scar, or do C-section and have it removed the same day. So I opted for the scheduled C-section because I was going to have to be cut open regardless. So my mom was going to be in the C-section with me. We go for my pre-op appointment, and she points to some kid that was playing outside of the hospital room. And she's like, "Oh, that little girl's really cute." And I said, "No, she's not cute at all." My mom was like, "Oh, Lord." My mom was also worried that I wasn't going to be maternal at that point, and it was the day before the C-section. Also with the C-section, it's really hard to see the baby right after. The bonding isn't there as much as a vaginal birth because you have to go into recovery. So my mom was actually really worried about that part of the C-section, which I wasn't even thinking about. So she communicated to the nurses, like, please let her see the baby a little bit longer than normal afterwards before you have to move her to recovery. I had the C-section. Everything went really well. And the minute I saw her, they really put her in my face. And she was crying. And I said, "Jaden." And she stopped crying. And she was like looking, but her eyes were closed. And you could tell she recognized my voice. And I remember thinking, she has eyelashes, like she looks like a baby. As I always pictured this burdened child that looked like a little monster. And seeing that she had skin and hair and she was a baby. I was just so far removed, and seeing her just made me realize that I wanted to be the best mom I could be for her. And all the fears that I had of my ex and what he was going to do, and just seemed to melt away because I knew that I was going to fight for her. I was going to be the best mom, and I was going to put her first. Whatever that meant for my life, if I had to make sacrifices with my friends, my dating, whatever that looked like, I knew that I wanted to make sure that she had a good life. And I knew it was going to be hard, but those 2 days in the hospital were life-changing for me.